is reinstating Browns defensive end Myles Garrett.
You've been swinging after the bell and after all of the whistle blows.
It's a serious offense. You need to be punished. He paid the price, okay? I don't think you carry it into this year. It's over and done with.
Something like this happens again. What does indefinite truly mean?
This was what the NFL wanted and intended to do all along.
And there's a brawl going down inside the 10-yard line.
Well, this just sets the stage for the rematch. Yeah, it does.
Thicker than water, right? They all alike.
ESPN 850 on the call there. It's Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio, ESPN 2. Myles Garrett is back. He's been reinstated. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the show. Penzo Performance Time. We knew it would happen eventually. I mean, indefinite doesn't mean gone forever. So we knew we would have to have this conversation eventually. The question was, now that we know indefinite meant essentially the rest of that season, we'll couch it as 6 games. Now that we know it was 6 games, what's everybody's reaction to it? It's Golic and Wingo. I'm Jason Fitz in for Trey with Mike Golic Jr. We've talked a little bit about this, guys, but I want you to hear what Teddy Bruschi had to say. ESPN NFL analyst was on NFL Live yesterday. I want you to hear his thoughts on the suspension length for Myles Garrett.
This opens up inconsistencies, which is something that there have been a lot of debates about with the NFL and how they've handled things in the past. And now it's just another example to where something like this happens again, and then now it's all about debate. Is it about 6 games? What does indefinite truly mean? Does it mean you finish the season and then you have a meeting? Or maybe if it's a few games, it's 6 games, then I go to the commissioner and tell him how sorry I am, and he lets me back in the league.
So the question becomes that, when I hear inconsistencies, all I think about right now is the collective bargaining agreement, right? Are inconsistencies and things like this enough that it becomes something the players want to address, or do they just continue to accept
I don't think this was an inconsistency. I mean, where was it inconsistent? I mean, in rules that you have anyway, like take the domestic violence. It's 6 games, but can go down or can go up. So you're kind of putting a number on it. I actually like what they did here because we didn't have the precedent. We had a helmet swing and a miss. We didn't have a connection. So those could be 2 different things if you want to say that. If you swing a helmet and miss or you swing a helmet and connect, do you want to put the same amount of games on it? If you do, that's fine as well. I had no problem with you know what? You're indefinitely suspended. Okay? We need to see where this goes. Because now should it change? What if the quarterback was hurt? What if he got hit in the head and he was hurt? Would that have changed some of it? Not to say that that's right or wrong, but sometimes you wait to see if somebody is injured about that. But even forgetting that, I don't mind the indefinite. Let's everybody take a breath here. Let's hear both sides, as they say, and then decide what we want to do because we don't really have a specific number for this action.
I think looking at this, the priority was just, all right, you know what, let's get him off the field for the rest of 2019. And I think that would have probably been true for any number of games, probably not an entire season if it had been like week 1 or week 2.
Right.
But I think this could have gone up to a fair amount of games. And to your point with consistency, I'm having us kind of look it up right now to see what the general number has been for suspensions for on-field infractions. And obviously, Vontaze Burfict, we know, has been the outlier for this because he's a multi-time repeat offender in a lot of this, and we have heard very much that escalates the way things are going to be punished here. But in general, what does this tend to be worth? Because we know in the NFL, you're always measured by the number you put to these certain things. And I keep having in the back of my mind, when I hear that number 6, I say, when the NFL changed its domestic violence policy after everything that happened with Ray Rice, the number was at least 6 games with room for more or less in the fine print that no one really read at the time.
Right.
But that 6-game number, now all of a sudden in my mind, I go, well, maybe if you go and, in this case, reach into the next season to make sure you go too far over that, now do you invite a comparison that nobody wants in this situation? And I've heard Dan Le Batard and those guys talk about this a lot. That's the difficult waters you wade into when you start assigning numbers to these kind of things.
But you have to assign numbers at some point to things, right? I mean, you can't just when something happens, you can't just say indefinite and then we'll figure it out. I mean, at some point, there are rules everywhere, and you have to assign something at some point.
I think for this, it's different than the things around domestic violence and assault, which Dan always points out are outside of the scope of what the NFL is able to legislate. But like you even brought up, what would have been different if the quarterback had been seriously hurt? Probably, because we pointed out it's different because Myles Garrett connected. Like we'd had video of people swinging a helmet,
Oh, yeah.
and it doesn't connect, and so we don't have the same reaction. And I think it's understandable because of the visual.
To me, it would be naive to think that the visual wouldn't have escalated it no matter what the visual was. And I'll say, if it had connected hard enough that we saw teeth flying out, or if Myles Garrett had Mason Rudolph had fallen to the ground and missed action because of it, if it had been a bigger name quarterback shocking off from it, all of those things, like realistically, the NFL has always been reactionary to things that are on video. And if this video is absolutely more stunning, and it's already, already shakes some people, but if you suddenly see somebody just collapse as a result of the hit, to me, it would have changed the punishment.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem with them saying you're done, you get off the field, and we're going to figure it out. You're indefinitely suspended. Where the conversation is going to come up was 6 games enough? And again, remember, they had an outside chance to make the playoffs, and he wasn't going to play the entire year. So this 6 games could have easily turned into 7 had they made the playoffs. So now you're setting the number at 7. So I think that was kind of in play as well. What if it happened in week 4? Would he have been off for the entire season, 12 games, maybe 13 if they made the playoffs? And then the number would be set at that. And again, these
but
are.
Junior makes a good point. That's such the Pandora's box they opened that I never thought of till this morning. Of now we're going to be comparing that to
And you do. It's
the
exactly
punishment
right.
for domestic violence, which is
Yep.
And I think it's worth noting in all this. So, and our we had this in our research packet this morning. Longest suspensions for on-the-field incidents. We mentioned Vontaze Burfict got 12 games in this same season, but we know he was a repeat offender.
Repeat offender.
Albert Hainsworth back in 2006 got 5 games.
For stomping on somebody's head who didn't have a helmet on.
Exactly, which is as egregious or maybe more in some people's eyes, depending on how you look at that.
Dude had to get stitched up. He stomped him when he didn't have his helmet on in the head.
And so, again, for Myles Garrett, whose I think worst infractions before that had been some borderline late hits, some people.
He had been fined for hits.
He had been fined for some hits, but in that same instance, they went a game beyond one of the uglier on-the-field incidents that we had seen. And so when you talk about a precedent, they really reestablished for someone that's a true first-time offender like this for an on-the-field incident that garnered a suspension. They established a new precedent. They went above and beyond what had happened in an instance that's probably the most comparable.
Yep, I agree. And I don't have I thought at the time, I just when it initially happened, I thought, well, 8 games. But then I thought, okay, wait, they're taking him off the field for the rest of the season. In all honesty, they probably got lucky with when it happened instead of week 4. Do you keep him off the rest of the season? All of a sudden, it's 12 games. I think that would have been, the kickback you might get because people going at Albert Hainsworth and say, wait a minute, that got 5. Where are you going with this? So I think the number actually worked out for them. Do you guys have a problem with this? I don't really have a problem with the number.
No, but I think what's strange is as I sit here and think about it, I go, you know what? If they had tagged 2 extra games,
I wouldn't have had a problem with that either.
And I don't think, and Jason, you brought this up before, the idea that the NFL can kind of news dump this right now. I think if they would have announced, hey, we're going to suspend him for 2 more games, we would have the conversation a lot like we're having today. And it probably still wouldn't be a big deal. We see guys, the NFL is one of those leagues where we just sort of wait for your suspension to be up, whether it's for PEDs or anything else. We look around and say, all right, well, how soon are they going to get him back? And what bump is that going to provide them on the field? Like,
no, you're right.
It's
that
a league so uniquely insulated to guys missing games for things like that.
You are so right that would have been the conversation. I personally wanted the suspension to be longer, and only because, not because of Myles Garrett particularly, or more because of the precedent I think that is set. That's a strange one to me in a world where it's just a shocking video every time I see it, to see a helmet hit a quarterback in the face. I continually ask myself, what would have happened if it was Patrick Mahomes? And if it was Patrick Mahomes that was hit, to me, it would have. I know we can't. Whataboutism is very dangerous, but if it's one of the brands of the NFL, much bigger penalty. So just because Mason Rudolph isn't very good, I don't think that the penalty should be any less for what happened in that.
And I guess my point is now, in light of the idea that Albert Hainsworth was 5 games, it was more.
No, that's fair.
Technically, they can look at that and say it was more.
Like, we live in a much different world. Like, if Albert Hainsworth had done the same thing today,
they probably would have put him in jail.
I mean, where the NFL is constantly fighting the concept of player safety and violence and all these things, I think they would have handled.
Although that did garner a lot of attention at the time. Like, that was a big moment. I can even remember as a kid from back then how much that rattled through, kind of in a similar way.
Golic and Wingo, presented by Progressive Insurance. Insurance for motorcycles, boats, and RVs for protection on the road and the water. See how much you can save in as little as 3 minutes at 1-800-PROGRESSIVE and Progressive.com. So that's not the only punishment that's going to be in the news today. Again, the Astros are speaking today at about 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, pitchers and catchers starting to report in baseball. Players and managers are starting to speak out on the sign-stealing scandal. And there were some strong words from one of the biggest brands in Major League Baseball. You'll hear it after this.
All right, enjoy the game of golf even more with a custom set of PXG clubs. Go to pxg.com to configure your clubs and buy. For a personal recommendation at your convenience, call 844-PLAY-PXG to speak to a PXG fitting expert. Or for the full PXG fitting experience, schedule an in-person appointment with a local PXG master fitter. Call or visit our website to book now. PXG, nobody makes golf clubs the way we do, period. Back after this, Golic and Wingo.
Golic and Wingo live from Chicago for the NBA All-Star Game.
Presented by Progressive Insurance at Harry Carey's Tavern, Navy Pier.
Great guests, Team LeBron versus Team Giannis, and us.
Golic and Wingo live from Chicago tomorrow at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Keep putting more fuel on the story.
It's supposed to be equal playing field, and it wasn't. Hopefully at some point in time we're not answering a bunch of questions about that.
Some point in time is not going to be anytime soon. It's Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2, presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Jason Fitz in for Trey with Mike Golic Jr. Again, as we've told you all morning, at about 9:30 this morning Eastern time, the Astros are going to come out and meet with the press. So we will see what that looks like and see if we get any information from it. In the meantime, we've already started to hear from some other players not within and front office people not within the Astros organization. So we're going to break it all down with the ESPN Major League Baseball analyst Doug Glanville joining us in studio with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. Doug, I wish we could come in and break down the X's and O's of what we need to know coming into the season. But first, we have other things to get to. So I want to get your reaction to a couple things. Aaron Boone, Yankees manager, yesterday spoke, and he said a couple of things I want you to hear. First, he was asked if he's convinced that the Astros didn't use devices in the ALCS against the Yankees.
No. I mean that's certainly one of those great unknowns, and certainly, I've spent time, as I'm sure a lot of people have, wondering all the things that could have potentially been going on, and probably we'll never know for sure, frankly.
That's the tip of the iceberg, because he was also asked about Carlos Beltran, Alex Cora, and A.J. Hinch, and this is what Aaron Boone, Yankees manager, had to say.
Look, those are still guys I consider friends. I've struggled, like I'm sure a lot of people have, with kind of making sense of it all and trying to kind of wrestle with my emotions and, in a way, get some clarity. I don't think you ever totally get there, and that's okay.
There's a level of genuine emotion in Boone's voice. So how does the baseball community at this point, not us, but within the baseball community, how did they move forward through all of this?
Slowly, because you want to make sure you understand the full extent of it. You want to understand the cultural implications. I mean, Boone is talking about how there's a sort of fraternity amongst the players, right? You played with these guys years before. You worked with them as professionals. There's so many years that have gone in that you've invested, and you develop a certain trust and a certain protection for the game, the integrity of the game. And fair play has to be at the heart of that. And that's what you're hearing from Boone, a certain level of disappointment around how that's been compromised, because they've shown a pathway to be able to win the pinnacle of this sport by cutting corners and cheating. A very direct line was found. And that 2% advantage, whatever you want to quantify, at that level is an exponential advantage, because everybody is good. Everybody's looking for that small edge. And it's something that is connected to this analytics revolution, because you're looking for value under every single stone. And I think there's times you get away from the humanity of it because it's so calculated. And Boone just feels that cold, sort of cold dish that's been served to him as a result of being sort of on the other side of it.
So, and I think, in all being realistic, that the Red Sox and the Astros are not the only two that have served this dish over time of breaking rules. Is it fair, as this thing goes forward and we're trying to hear from players now, with that Wall Street Journal coming out and Carlos Beltran being with the Yankees, him and McCann, and then all of a sudden being with the Astros and saying, the report is saying, man, you guys are behind the times in this. Fair to look at the Yankees? Fair
Sure,
to look at
it's fair.
those teams from them to say what was going on?
Yeah, it's fair. And the problem for Major League Baseball right now, it's sort of like PEDs. How far down the rabbit hole do you really want to go? Because if you just say, okay, I'm just going to investigate everybody under the sun, you have to be prepared for what that answer is. And is it really bad actors? Is it and that's convenient to say, oh, we got rid of the bad actors. Now we're moving forward. And the challenge today, the technology that's sort of spinning back around on this issue is that everybody's an investigator, right? Everybody's a network who has a Twitter account. Everybody's going to keep going. So they can put a bow on and say the investigation's done. It is not done. And more players will talk, more interns will talk. So they need to get ahead of this quickly because there could possibly be no end to it.
Doug Glanville with us in studio, our ESPN Major League Baseball analyst. Yes, those online investigators have a home. It's called Reddit. It's a terrifying place where information goes. But we had this discussion all yesterday, so we heard from Aaron Boone there. We're going to hear from the Astros today. When we get through this initial wave of questions and answers with the players, with managers, does it stop there? Does it keep going? How long does this linger?
Look, I played in the PED steroid era, right in the heart of it. All the top players that were part of this, it doesn't end. I mean, every time a guy hits 50 home runs it's still a question out there. And the challenge that transition was from the selfishness, individual choice, say, of PEDs versus now this institutional question, this organizational sort of conspiracy. That's what's scary for the game because you have a whole team that's supported top down that has this that's transpired through this entire organization. So now you have a whole team that you're questioning whether the validity of this championship, and it keeps going. So that's a much bigger problem from a league-wide standard than, say, PEDs individually.
Doug Glanville, ESPN Major League Baseball analyst, joining us. So, what effect, given the fact that, as you said, that we don't know how far this trickles down. The first time the Astros are playing a team and they're in an opposing stadium, what are the players going to do on the field?
I mean, well, it's not good. Historically, there was always this tit for tat, right? The retaliation. I mean, if you stole signs back in, say, early 2000s, someone's going to hit you in the back. They said, oh, okay, I see that guy's tipping the pitches from second base. I'm suspicious of that. That's how it was sort of settled. But the policing yourself is kind of off the rails now because the depth of this is so much larger than, oh, I stole a sign at second base and I whispered it to one of my teammates. Now they work in sort of an aggregating model because you have information being shared through analytics and they work together as a single organism. So it's a lot easier for everybody to get on board, everybody to share information in real time. And that reflects kind of where we are as a society, like everything's in real time. So the challenge they have now is that we're at this stage where you can't just say, oh, let's police it ourselves. It's not possible anymore. It's too fast and the information's moving too quickly.
Did baseball make a mistake not punishing the players in this?
I don't think they've had a choice. Not if they were going to get certain level of information. And they also have a brand to protect. And that sounds cold and calculated also, but they're also looking through that lens. If you continue to say, all right, get all these players, where does it stop? Do you decide you're going to punish a guy from 2017 who now signed with the Marlins? Do you take him off that roster? Should the Marlins pay for that? Do the Red Sox have something to go against the Astros because they lost their manager and Beltran? So it's a really challenging where do you start, right? Where do you start with that?
Then what's the deterrent?
Well,
because why does a player care if his manager or GM, it may sound heartless, gets fired as long as they win, they get a bigger contract, they get what individualized PEDs would get you, more money. What there's no deterrent.
Right. That's the problem. And that's what they're going to have to answer because like you said, if PEDs, like, oh, I took PEDs and I got suspended for 30 games, but I signed a 5-year deal, whatever. So those are the calculations that they're going to have to make, but there's no question there's not enough right now of a deterrent. Now there's embarrassment. There's going to be a nightmare for the Astros for the 2020 season everywhere they go. That may be something. They seem to be showing some contrition in certain players that are no longer there. Yeah. But so yes, it's going to be ongoing. But the challenge is how did they get that information from the players? Well, they had some level of immunity to be able to get it. And the Players Association is going to be faced with the same questions we were faced about PEDs. You know sort of what the right thing is, but you're also trying to preserve privacy and sort of your rights as players that have been negotiated collectively. And that always comes into a collision point when it comes to these types of issues.
We've seen players especially vocal on their feelings on this in a way that complicates that even further. I think their peers that have come out with so much anger around this in a lot of cases because of the way it affects other guys. To that end, when we hear from the Astros today, and that we know we're going to carry that press conference coming up later, is there anything that they can say at this point that helps push this in a better direction?
Well, they have to be transparent and truthful. I'm not sure you're going to get all of it. I doubt it. You have a lawsuit potentially hovering. Now you're worried about saying something that indicts your team. I mean, you have a huge problem, but just keep in mind this. This scheme could have never lasted. Never. There's no way, because it inherently divides pitchers and hitters. Because who's the beneficiaries of a system of this? The hitters. Pitchers don't get anything out of this. You only get something out of it because you happen to be on the team that might win using this system. But in effect, you delegitimize pitchers as an entire profession within the sport. There's no way pitchers would have stood by this for any sustainable period of time, even if you're wearing the uniform of the team that's benefiting. So I believe that there's no chance this could have lasted, and it's clear that someone would have been calling the bell, blowing the whistle, whether Mike Fiers or any other pitcher would have been the first in line.
So I guess the other part of it I still go back to is how much can we trust that? I mean, I get what you're saying in the grand scheme of things, but to me, I feel like we could find out in a year that everybody was cheating all the way across the board. And at that point, now we've got people retaliating against people when they were, in fact, part of a cheating scandal, too. I mean, isn't there some point where Major League Baseball, the Astros, everybody would just benefit by coming out, throwing everything out on the table, and just taking a fresh start?
Well, they're going to have to, yes. There's no question about it. And no, the Astros just became maybe beyond they got so good at it, and they perfected it, and they engineer. But yes, all teams are trying to find an edge. Sign stealing is part of the game. It is part of the game. The problem is technology and using it in real time. Just imagine, your basketball game, the final 30 seconds, and someone has a camera on the play that the coach is drawing up, and that's fed to the opposing bench. Everybody on the Patriots or whatever team knows all the plays coming. Can you imagine throughout sports if everybody knew what the other team was doing at all times? You don't have fair competition. You have no element of surprise. I mean, that's what it is. And so, yes, they're going to have to try to get ahead of this, but their Astros are not alone. They just got really good, and they have the talent to go with it. But we have to find out, and that investigation has to continue. And I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
Doug Glanville with us here in studio. How much of that also does have to do with it being the Astros? Because I heard Jeff Passan say this on a number of places, but it was on the ESPN Daily when I first heard it, and he reiterated it yesterday, that this Astros organization and front office were long looked at as a group that had an incredible amount of hubris. They thought they were better than everyone else, smarter than everybody else, and that sort of defiance and the way that front office operated really rubbed people the wrong way in general. Is there a little added malice because of what their reputation was going into this?
Yeah, no doubt. They have that reputation, and I think it's a natural progression when you get deep into the weeds of analytics that you're going to have rogue organizations. You're going to, because remember what you're doing in analytics. You're finding value, and you're treating everybody kind of like an asset, and you're making calculation and pictures or algorithms. And so, yes, you lose some humanity when everything is a cold calculus. And so it makes sense that you kind of ignore traditions. You're going to ignore sort of how people have built on the shoulders of others. You're just going to say, well, I came now, and I just invented this system. So yes, it's whether it's the Astros or any other team, you could see in this time we're in right now, technologically, that people will go off the rails and push the envelope to this point.
Doug Glanville joining us. You finished playing in 2004. You've played for 4 different teams. I'm just guessing we're past the statute of limitations. How intricate did sign stealing that you may have been involved in, or was around when you were going?
Yeah, it was definitely around, but there was an analog version to this. All right, it's one thing if you're sitting on the bench and the pitcher tips his cap and you know he's throwing a curveball, or you're on first base trying to steal and you know the catcher sets up high to block the ball in the dirt. That's a curveball, and you're going to steal second base. That's a skill, and you share that because it's information gleaned from what your observation and your insight about the game. That's one thing. But to take technology, use it in real time where you're basically like corporate espionage, stealing signs, and applying it in real time where you have advanced information, that's an entire different level.
Did that happen in your years playing? I'm not saying with you.
I'm
but
sure it did. Our team, I didn't play for a lot of teams that were interested in sign stealing. Texas in 2003, played for the Rangers. We talked about in spring training about kicking the base and relaying, but it didn't stick. And I know for me, with being at second, I'm trying to steal third. Like I'm like, okay, I'm relaying, but yeah, you're trying, but I'm really worried about that. And a lot of hitters didn't like it. But the real time is a different thing. If you stole signs then, you shared it. Okay, all right, I'm going to tell this guy who's on deck. But the technology allows you to mass share information in aggregate. And you can create a single movement as a team around it. And that's why with the speed of information, you're getting now organizational collapse.
Follow him on Twitter at Doug Glanville. Doug, we appreciate your expertise, your honesty through all of this. This is great. And we'll see what the Astros say today. Doug, we appreciate your time.
Get ready to spend a lot of time on the TV today, my friend.
Yeah, okay. It's going to be a big day. In the meantime, did the NFL get it right reinstating Myles Garrett after a 6-game suspension? We'll find out from one of our experts after this SportsCenter update.
Davis slips the screen, goes inside. He'll cut away from the ball. They've cleared everybody out. James drives the foul line, throws away right. Davis off the catch for three. Bang! He got it. Anthony Davis buries his second consecutive three. And the lead is back to Los Angeles, 119-116.
Now the Lakers win sounded on ESPN Radio, 120-116. They beat Denver in Denver last night, and in doing so have now won 17 straight road games against Western Conference opponents. LeBron James led the way with 32, 12, and 14 in a triple-double, making him just the fourth Laker to record 20 triple-doubles in franchise history. Sticking with the NBA, the Grizzlies took down the Trailblazers 111-104, but the big news coming out of that game was an injury to Damian Lillard. Lillard suffered a right groin strain and will be held out of All-Star Weekend events. Lillard's been averaging 32.9 points per game since the start of the new year. And moving on to the NFL. It's announced yesterday that Browns DN Myles Garrett was reinstated after his role in a fight with the Pittsburgh Steelers in November, during which he ripped off Steelers quarterback Mason Rudolph's helmet and proceeded to swing it at his head. Garrett missed the final 6 games of that regular season.
That's SportsCenter, brought to you by Sport Clips. Your next haircut now is a shortcut. Introducing the Sport Clips haircut app. Now the cut you want is just a tap away. Download today and check in. No appointment needed. And don't forget that beard trim. Sport Clips, cut the weight.
The NFL is reinstating Browns defensive end Myles Garrett from his indefinite suspension.
It's a serious offense. You need to be punished. He paid the price, okay? I don't think you carry it into this year. It's over and done with.
Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. Myles Garrett back, been reinstated by the NFL. Jason fits in for Trey Wingo, sitting with Mike Golic Jr. And now we're joined by ESPN NFL analyst Damian Woody, joining us in studio with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. Woody, you've had a day to let it soak in. You feel like Myles Garrett. What are your thoughts on the suspension length?
I actually feel like at peace with it, to be honest with you. I remember watching a game with Scott Van Pelt on Thursday night because I was doing the post game, and the first thing when it all unfolded, like my jaw was on the ground. I'm like, oh my God, am I really watching this on TV? So my first inclination was, okay, this was beyond the play of football and it was assault. I was one of the guys who said that, and I thought what the NFL did was smart. They said, you know what, indefinite, because the emotions were so high that they didn't want to come out and just put a number on it. We're just going to take this guy off the field for the rest of the season, and that'll be that. And it turned out to be 6-game suspension. And I think, just moving forward, when you look at Myles Garrett and the player that he is, his background, he doesn't have anything, any malicious type things in his background. So I think just the conversation he had with the commissioner, the NFL to me just wants to put a bow on this thing. And let's move on with business as usual.
Are you worried at all? Because the word that always comes up anytime there's a suspension number handed down, and especially for something like this that we hadn't really seen happen that way before, is precedent. Are you worried at all about the idea that the next time something like this potentially comes up, that now we have this 6-game number baked into it?
Well, listen, I think what's one of the things that we talk about with the league that's always been a problem is consistency as far as handing out punishment. Okay, so now you have a 6-game suspension, and I think this was the biggest one because we had Albert Hainsworth, I think, had 5
games, right?
He had
Stopping
5
on
games.
a player's head.
And I think Richie Incognito had a situation, but I don't know if it was more than 6.
It wasn't. So for on-the-field suspensions, Vontaze Burfict has the longest suspension for an on-the-field instance. Obviously, his is multiplied by past
history,
action.
correct.
He got 12 games in this same season. Myles Garrett is second on that list with 6. Albert Hainsworth third with 5. So that's the most we've seen for
and
on
as
the
far
field.
as this action, you go back to 2013 in a preseason game, Antonio Smith ripped off Richie Incognito's helmet, swung it at him and missed.
Right.
If you want to put that into the equation as well. Got suspended 2 games, and they were preseason games. So
Correct.
I think one might have been the first regular season game, but that was it. So, and it's 6-7 years later, so I'm sure that changes. But I'm with you. I didn't have a problem with this, but the what ifs were, what if it happened in week 4? Would it have been a 12-game suspension? Would it have been done for the year? And again, we don't know.
We don't know.
And now everybody that says, well, it set a precedent, well, at some point it was going to, right? Whether they did 2 more games this year, then it was going to be 8 games.
Correct.
Or 10 games if they want more. So I'm with you. I kind of don't have an issue with this.
Yeah, listen, at some point, like, there was no history. There was no one ruling that's happened with the NFL as far as this is concerned that you could point to and say, okay, this has happened before, this is what we're going to go with. And like I said, a lot of this was highlighted by the fact that it was on national TV Thursday night game.
Yep.
So I think the NFL is just trying to move on to the 2020 season.
So let's move on to the 2020 season for the Browns then. Myles Garrett was having a hell of a season before this happened,
10
obviously.
sacks, 10 games.
So now you're looking at a team that underperformed offensively. Freddie Kitchens is gone. They bring in a new coaching staff. What are your expectations for a team we were all super hyped on last year? What are realistic expectations for the Browns now going into this year?
Well, I think, listen, we all know that the Browns, as far as talent on paper, they're one of the more talented teams in the National Football League. But that alone doesn't equate to, winning football games. Any organization like the Browns, changing the culture is like turning the Titanic. It really is. It's like literally it takes time. But the biggest thing that's been hindering the Browns, honestly, has just been the lack of continuity all across the organization from the top down. And so if the Browns are going to take a step forward as far as an organization, that's where it has to start. It has to start with the continuity and establishing some type of culture there to get these guys to buy in.
Damian Woody with us in studio here on Golic and Wingo. Want to switch gears a little bit from the NFL to college just because I saw it was something we were all tweeting about yesterday when Mel Tucker takes the job with Michigan State. And I saw your tweet and said logging on. It seemed like a lot of people were fake mad about what was going on with Mel Tucker. What did you mean by that?
Well, listen, because I always say on Twitter, everybody's mad about something. Because Twitter is not like the people in the middle. That's not Twitter.
No.
Twitter is all about the extremes.
Yeah. That's LinkedIn. That's LinkedIn.
Right, exactly. So I've always I've tweeted about said that before. Okay, what are people fake mad about now on Twitter? And so when I saw I was reading about the Mel Tucker situation, I just said, look, does it look bad with Mel Tucker just jumping ship? Yeah, like the optics look bad. But when you consider everything that encompassing why he made that decision, the fact he's going to the Big Ten, going to a better program, double the salary, like when you
going near where he's from,
right? Exactly. Like he has family there. Like when you put all that together, how many people out there would turn that down? And that's my thing to everybody. Why some of these people on their high horses, I'm like, if you put yourself in that situation with all those factors right there, would you turn it down?
How about the other things we're talking? Because we agree with you 100%.
Yes.
You can make that move, and fine. But the love he was showing in tweets right before about how devoted he was, and the thing that really hacks us is when coaches start getting on players because they want to transfer, and all of a sudden they don't have the guts to stick it out. When a coach basically going to have decades of coaching and a player has basically 5 years.
Because Mel Tucker went on, I think, had a quote during October that said there's no transfer portal in the real world.
That's the aggravating
That's the thing that pisses me off the most. And we hear these coaches are so hypocritical, when it comes to the whole transfer portal. But then you see these coaches, they jump ship.
Which again, it's cool. They're allowed to.
That's fine. Right? At the mere sight of a better opportunity, career opportunity, they're just jumping ship, gone. But the players, you need to honor this and honor that. So we've heard that time and time again. And honestly, I'm just of the mindset of anything to create some type of anarchy or just blow it up, I'm all for it. Just blow it up.
I think you and a lot of other people now, though,
Yeah.
like I think we're at a time, it used to be, I always felt like fans kind of fought players on that idea of being able to transfer. But I think we've seen increasingly more and more the public, we've seen lawmakers behind this idea.
Right.
Like, now these kids should be allowed to go out and find the best opportunity for them.
Well, you see the momentum, like you talked about. I mean, you have states like South Carolina, New York, California. Like
Florida.
there's momentum heading in that direction, and I don't know if the NCAA or any of these other people, they're going to be able to stop this momentum.
Yeah, and that's the biggest part. No matter what the NCAA wants, Congress is going to be able to do what Congress wants. You want to talk about two interesting entities going at it there. Follow him on Twitter at Damian Woody, one of the best follows out there. Woody, we appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thanks
no
for
problem,
hanging out
man.
with us.
Thanks, boss.
All right, coming up next, we were talking about Mel Tucker and Michigan State earlier, and it raised a question about college sports and the decisions that you have to make when you're picking your school that I've never heard before. We'll tell you about it next after this.
All right, running your business is a 24/7, 365 job. Every problem, every solution, it is up to you. When a problem arises, you need a solution. Granger's got your back. Whether you need critical items fast, something isn't working like it should, or you just can't find exactly what you're looking for, Granger is ready to help. Because you don't stop, neither do they. Granger has 24/7 customer support, sourcing specialists, and same-day pickup and delivery options. Don't forget about their on-demand products and technical expertise. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, Granger's got your back. Call or click Granger.com or stop by a branch. Granger, for the ones who get it done. Back after this, Golic and Wingo.